My sister ran off with my rich boyfriend. 5 years later at a reunion, she couldn't believe who I married. I still remember the smirk on my sister's face the day she packed her bags, with my boyfriend's car keys in her hand. The sound of designer heels clicking against hardwood floors should have been my first warning. But I was too busy fumbling with my apartment keys, exhausted from a 3-day work conference in Miami that had ended a day early. All I wanted was to collapse on my couch, order some Chinese takeout, and maybe call Damien to tell him about the promotion I'd just landed. I pushed open the door to my Atlanta apartment, expecting the familiar scent of vanilla candles and the quiet hum of my air purifier. Instead, I was hit with the overwhelming smell of Chanel No. 5, my sister Simone's signature fragrance, mixed with something else. Something that made my stomach drop before my brain could even process what I was seeing. 2 suitcases sat by my front door. Not mine. Expensive leather ones with gold hardware that I recognized immediately because I'd helped Simone pick them out for her last vacation to Dubai. The same vacation she'd spent complaining about how basic my lifestyle was compared to hers. "Simone?" I called out, my voice echoing in the suddenly foreign space of my own home. The clicking of heels stopped, then started again, slower this time, deliberate, like a predator who'd been caught but wasn't ashamed of it. She appeared in my living room doorway, wearing a red silk dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Her dark hair was perfectly styled in loose waves, her makeup flawless despite it being 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. She looked like she was heading to a gala, not standing in her younger sister's modest one-bedroom apartment. But it was the smirk that made my blood run cold. That same satisfied, superior smile she'd worn our entire lives whenever she'd taken something that belonged to me. My favorite doll when we were kids. My high school boyfriend, Jason, who she'd seduced just to prove she could. My college acceptance letter to Spelman, which she'd hidden until after the enrollment deadline because she couldn't stand that I'd gotten in somewhere she hadn't. "Oh, Alana," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You're back early. What are you doing here?" I asked, though part of me already knew. The suitcases. The dress. The way she was standing in my living room like she owned it. "I'm leaving, actually." She held up a set of keys, letting them dangle from her perfectly manicured fingers. Keys I recognized. The key fob to Damien's Mercedes. The spare key to his penthouse that he'd given me 6 months ago when things started getting serious between us. My heart began to pound. "Where's Damien?" "Loading the car," she said simply, like she was talking about the weather. "We didn't expect you back until tomorrow." This is awkward. The word awkward hit me like a slap. Awkward was forgetting someone's birthday. Awkward was showing up to a party overdressed. This was something else entirely. This was betrayal in its purest form, served up with a side of casual cruelty that only Simone could deliver. "What do you mean, loading the car?" I asked, though my voice sounded strange and distant, like it was coming from someone else. "Oh, honey." She tilted her head, studying me with the same expression someone might use when looking at a wounded animal. "Did you really think he was going to stay with you forever? I mean, look at you." I looked down at myself. My wrinkled business suit from the conference. My comfortable flats. My hair pulled back in a simple ponytail because I'd been focused on impressing clients, not on looking like I'd stepped off a magazine cover. "Simone, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice taking on that innocent tone she'd perfected as a child. "Love just found us. Real love. Not whatever this was." She gestured around my apartment with obvious disdain. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made us both turn. Damien appeared, carrying 2 more suitcases and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Damien," I whispered. He set down the suitcases and finally looked at me. For a moment, I saw something that might have been regret flash across his face. But then Simone moved to his side, sliding her arm around his waist with the possessiveness of a woman marking her territory. "Alana, He started, then stopped. Cleared his throat. Tried again. "I left you a note." A note. 3 years together, and he left me a note. I found it on my kitchen counter, written on my own stationery in his careful handwriting. Asterisk Alana, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Simone, and I found something real, something we can't ignore. You deserve better than someone who can't give you their whole heart. I hope someday you'll understand. Damien asterisk. I read it twice, then a third time, waiting for it to make sense. Waiting for this to be some kind of elaborate joke. But when I looked up, they were both watching me with expressions that ranged from pity to impatience. You're really doing this, I said. It wasn't a question. Oh, Alana, Simone sighed, like I was being unreasonably dramatic. Don't be so tragic. You'll find someone else. Someone more suitable for your lifestyle. The way she said lifestyle made it sound like a disease. 3 years, Damien, I said, ignoring my sister entirely. 3 years we were together. I know, he said quietly, and they were good years. But Simone, she understands my world in a way that I don't. I finished for him. He had the decency to look ashamed. It's not about you not being enough, Alana. It's about finding someone who wants the same things I want. And what exactly do you want that I don't? The question came out sharper than I intended, but I was past caring about sounding desperate. Simone answered for him. Ambition, honey. Drive. The desire to be more than just comfortable. She looked around my apartment again, her nose wrinkling slightly. Damien needs a partner who can keep up with him. Someone who belongs in his world. His world. I repeated slowly. You mean his money. I mean his life, she snapped, the mask of false sweetness finally slipping. The galas, the business dinners, the networking events. When was the last time you even got your nails done, Alana? When was the last time you bought a dress that cost more than $50? I stared at her, realizing that this wasn't just about Damien. This was about everything Simone had always believed about me. That I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't enough, period. And somehow, she'd convinced the man I loved that she was right. The family understands, she continued, moving closer to Damien like she was shielding him from me. Mama said it makes sense. Birds of a feather and all that. That was the final blow. Our mother, who had always favored Simone, who had always made excuses for her behavior, had given her blessing to this betrayal. You talked to Mama? I asked. Of course I did. I'm not heartless, Alana. I wanted to make sure the family would support us. She paused, letting that sink in. They do. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the clock ticking on my kitchen wall, the hum of traffic outside, the sound of my own heart breaking into pieces, so small they might never be put back together. We should go, Damien said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. We should, Simone agreed. She picked up her purse, my purse, I realized with a shock, one I'd lent her months ago and never gotten back, and headed for the door. Damien lingered for a moment, looking like he wanted to say something else. But Simone called his name from the hallway, and whatever words he might have offered died on his lips. I watched them leave. Watched my sister walk away with my boyfriend, my family support, and apparently my entire life as I knew it. The door closed behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo through my empty apartment. I stood there for a long time, holding that note, listening to the sound of Damien's Mercedes pulling out of my parking lot, taking my sister and my future with it. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the realization that everyone, Simone, Damien, my own mother, had looked at me and decided I wasn't worth fighting for. That I was the kind of person things happened to, not the kind of person who made things happen. But as I crumpled up that note and threw it in the trash, something else started growing in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Something that felt dangerous and unfamiliar and strangely liberating. For the first time in my life, I had absolutely nothing left to lose. And sometimes that's exactly when you find out who you really are. He told me he'd met Simone years ago, and she laughed in his face when she found out he was just an intern. 18 months later, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the bathroom mirror of the Hyatt Regency in Charlotte. The move from Atlanta had been brutal, leaving behind everything familiar, starting over with nothing but a few savings and a burning determination to rebuild myself from the ground up. But here I was, wearing a navy blazer that actually fit properly, my hair styled in a way that made me look professional instead of invisible. Therapy had helped. Dr. Williams had made me realize that I'd spent most of my life making myself smaller so others could feel bigger. "You're not responsible for other people's insecurities, Alana," she told me during one of our sessions. "And you're certainly not responsible for making yourself less so they can feel like more." The freelance PR work had been a lifeline. Small clients at first, a local bakery, a boutique fitness studio, a family-owned restaurant. But word spread quickly when you actually cared about the work, when you treated each client like they mattered. Now I was coordinating events for tech companies, helping them navigate product launches and crisis communications, which was how I found myself at the Charlotte Tech Summit, checking my phone for the 100th time to make sure everything was running smoothly. The morning sessions had gone perfectly, but the evening networking event was where real connections happened, where careers were made or broken. "Excuse me, are you Alana Brooks?" I turned to find a man standing behind me, tall and lean with warm brown eyes and the kind of smile that made you want to smile back. He was wearing a simple black suit that looked expensive but not flashy, and there was something about his presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "Yes, that's me," I said, extending my hand. "You must be one of our speakers?" "Marcus Holt," he said, shaking my hand with a firm grip. "I'm giving the keynote tomorrow on sustainable energy solutions. I wanted to thank you for the smooth coordination. Your team made sure everything I needed was handled perfectly." I felt a flush of pride. "Thank you. That means a lot coming from someone of your caliber." I'd done my research on all the speakers, and Marcus Holt was impressive, CEO of a rapidly growing green energy company, featured in several business magazines, known for his innovative approach to renewable technology. "Would you like to grab dinner?" he asked. "I know a place that's not too crowded. We could talk about the event, maybe discuss some ideas I have for future conferences." Something about his tone told me this wasn't just business, but I found myself nodding anyway. I'd like that. The restaurant he chose was intimate but not romantic, soft lighting, quiet conversation, the kind of place where you could actually hear yourself think. We ordered wine, and I found myself relaxing for the first time in months. "So," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair, "tell me about yourself. What made you get into PR?" I gave him the polished version, my interest in communications, my passion for helping businesses tell their stories. But somehow, as the evening progressed, I found myself sharing more. About the move from Atlanta, about starting over, about learning to trust my own instincts again. "You know," Marcus said after I'd finished describing my journey, "I have to admit something. When I saw your name on the event coordination team, I thought it sounded familiar. And then I remembered where I'd heard it before." My stomach tightened. "Oh, a few years ago, I was at a party in Atlanta. Some high-end networking thing for young professionals. I was still working my way up then, just an intern at a small renewable energy startup." He paused, swirling his wine glass. "I met this woman there. Gorgeous, confident, the kind of person who owned every room she walked into. I had a sinking feeling I knew where this was going. Her name was Simone Brooks," Marcus continued, watching my face carefully. "She seemed interested at first, asking about my work, what I was passionate about. But the moment I mentioned I was an intern, making $30,000 a year," he shook his head, a bitter smile playing at his lips. "She literally laughed in my face, said something about not wasting her time on people who weren't going anywhere." My heart stopped. "Simone is my sister." "I figured as much when I saw your last name," Marcus said gently. "The resemblance is there, though you're nothing like her in the ways that matter." I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Marcus, I'm so sorry. She can be difficult." Difficult is one word for it. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "She told me I was exactly the kind of man smart women avoided, that I should aim lower, date someone more suited to my limited prospects. The cruelty of it took my breath away, even though it was so typically Simone." "What did you do?" "I thanked her for her honesty and walked away," Marcus said. "But I never forgot it. That night changed something in me. I realized I was tired of being dismissed, tired of being seen as not enough. And now, his smile was different this time, confident, almost predatory. Now I'm the CEO of a company worth $1.2 billion. We're about to go public next year, and I personally hold a 30% stake in the company. He paused, letting that sink in. Your sister's words became my motivation. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered her laugh. I stared at him, processing this information. The quiet, humble man sitting across from me was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And my sister had rejected him because he wasn't successful enough. The irony is beautiful, isn't it? Marcus continued. I spent years building something she would have wanted, only to realize I'd outgrown the need for her approval entirely. That's incredible, I said, still trying to wrap my head around it. What's incredible is sitting here with you, Marcus said, his voice softer now. You've been nothing but professional, kind, and genuine all day. You haven't once asked about my net worth or what car I drive. You're interested in the work, in doing things well. I felt something shift between us, a connection that had nothing to do with business or networking. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Of course. Would you be interested in having dinner again tomorrow? After the conference ends? Somewhere we can really talk, not just about work. I looked at him, really looked at him. At the way he'd turned his pain into purpose, his rejection into rocket fuel. At the kindness in his eyes despite what he'd been through. I'd like that, I said. And for the first time since that terrible day in my Atlanta apartment, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. We didn't post each other online. Not a single hint. Because we were building something deeper, something neither of them would see coming. 6 months into dating Marcus, I realized we had created something I'd never experienced before, a relationship built on substance rather than show. While other couples flooded social media with their every moment, Marcus and I existed in a beautiful bubble of privacy that felt revolutionary after years of performing happiness for others. No photos tonight, Marcus said as we settled into our corner booth at Canoe, one of Atlanta's most exclusive restaurants. We'd driven down for the weekend so I could handle a client crisis, but Marcus had insisted on making it special. Are you embarrassed to be seen with me? I teased, though I knew the real reason. We'd had this conversation before. How social media had become a weapon in the wrong hands, how privacy was the ultimate luxury in a world obsessed with digital validation. You know better than that, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I just like having you all to myself. No comments, no likes, no strangers thinking they know our business. It was working. Over the past months, Marcus had helped me see potential in myself I'd never recognized. When I mentioned wanting to start my own agency instead of freelancing, he didn't just encourage me. He introduced me to his lawyer, his accountant, helped me understand business structures and growth strategies. You have something most PR firms don't, he told me one evening as we reviewed my business plan on his kitchen island. You actually care about telling authentic stories. Most agencies just want to manipulate perception. You want to help people show their truth. Brooks Communications launched 3 months later with 5 clients, including 2 referrals from Marcus's network. But he'd been careful about it, never making it seem like charity or nepotism. These are people who need exactly what you offer, he'd explained. I'm just making an introduction. The work speaks for itself. And it did. My client list grew organically: a sustainable fashion brand, a nonprofit focused on education equity, a restaurant group committed to local sourcing. Companies that had stories worth telling, values worth promoting. Marcus's own success continued to skyrocket. His company, Holt Renewable Solutions, had secured 3 major contracts and was expanding into international markets. But he never flaunted it, never made our relationship about his wealth or status. Instead, we built something quiet and strong. Weekend mornings at the farmer's market. Long walks where we talked about everything and nothing. Evenings when he'd review my proposals and I'd listen to his ideas for new clean energy initiatives. I want to meet your friends, he said one Saturday as we painted the walls of my new office space, a small but bright suite in Charlotte's Arts District. You have met my friends, I said, rolling sage green paint onto the accent wall we'd chosen. I mean your old friends. From Atlanta. Your family. I paused, brushed halfway to the wall. Marcus. I know it's complicated, he said gently. But I don't want you to feel like you have to hide parts of your life because of what happened with Simone. The truth was, I'd been hiding more than just Marcus from my old life. I'd been hiding the new me, confident, successful, happy. My mother called occasionally, always with news about Simone and Damien's latest adventures, their engagement party, their business ventures. I listened politely and shared nothing of substance about my own life. There's something I need to tell you, Marcus said, setting down his paint roller. About the timing of all this. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The family reunion. I know about it. I stared at him. How do you? Your cousin Denise reached out to me on LinkedIn. Apparently, word got around that you were dating someone, and she did some digging. He smiled ruefully. She invited me to the reunion in Savannah next month. Said the family would love to meet me. The reunion. Simone had been posting about it for weeks, how she was organizing the whole thing, how it would be the event of the year, how everyone was so excited to celebrate family. You talked to my cousin without telling me? She called me yesterday. I told her I'd have to discuss it with you first. Marcus moved closer, his voice gentle but serious. Alana, I think we should go. Are you insane? The words came out sharper than I intended. Marcus, you don't understand what you're asking. My family, they chose Simone. They chose her side of the story. Maybe it's time they saw yours. I set down my brush, paint dripping onto the newspaper we'd spread on the floor. This isn't about revenge, Marcus. I've moved on. We've built something beautiful here. Why would we risk that? Because you haven't moved on completely, he said quietly. You've built something beautiful, yes. But you've also built it in hiding. You haven't told your family about your success, about your agency, about us. You're still letting them think you're the same broken person Simone left behind. The words stung because they were true. Even Dr. Williams had mentioned it in our recent sessions, how I'd replaced self-destruction with self-protection, but neither was the same as self-acceptance. They hurt you, Marcus continued, but hiding from them gives them power over your story. What if we changed that narrative? And how exactly would we change it? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped completely. By going as my wife, he said simply. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at the ring box in his hands. Marcus. I know this isn't the proposal you probably imagined, he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond that caught the afternoon light streaming through my office windows. I know it's connected to all this complicated family stuff. But, Alana, I've known for months that I want to marry you. Not because of some grand gesture or perfect moment, but because you make me want to be the best version of myself every single day. The ring was perfect, classic but unique, substantial but not ostentatious. Everything a ring should be, and nothing it shouldn't. I love you, Marcus said. I love your laugh, your work ethic, your ability to see the good in people even after they've hurt you. I love that you make the best pancakes in North Carolina, and that you cry at dog videos, and that you've turned your pain into purpose. Tears were streaming down my face now. Marry me, Alana. Not for revenge. Not to prove anything to anyone. Marry me because we're good together. Because we build each other up instead of tearing each other down. I looked at him, this incredible man who saw me, really saw me, and chose me anyway, who wanted to face my family with me, not despite them. Yes, I whispered. Then louder. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Marcus never did anything halfway. So, he said, kissing me softly, want to crash a family reunion? I thought about Simone's smug face, about my mother's disappointed sighs, about all the times I'd been made to feel less than enough. Then I looked at my ring, at Marcus, at the office we'd painted together that represented everything I'd built from nothing. Let's do it, I said. After all, I had nothing left to hide. The look on her face when I stepped out of that Bentley in a custom gold gown? Worth every second of silence. The Savannah mansion Simone had rented for the reunion was everything she'd promised on social media: sprawling gardens, white columns, the kind of old Southern elegance that screamed money and status. Cars lined the circular driveway. BMWs, Mercedes, a few Autos. The kind of vehicles that announced their owners had made it. And then there was Marcus's Bentley Bentayga, sliding past them all like it owned the place. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, his hand finding mine as our driver. Yes, we'd hired a driver because Marcus said we needed to make an entrance. Pulled up to the front steps. I looked down at my custom gold silk gown, the one Marcus had insisted we commission from a designer in Charlotte. It hugged every curve, the color making my skin glow, the cut sophisticated but stunning. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and the diamond earrings Marcus had given me as a wedding gift caught the late afternoon light. We'd gotten married 2 weeks ago. A simple ceremony at the courthouse with 2 witnesses Marcus had hired, followed by dinner at the most expensive restaurant in Charlotte. Nothing elaborate, nothing posted online. Just us, legally binding our lives together before walking into what would undoubtedly be a battlefield. "I'm ready," I said, and meant it. The driver opened my door, and I stepped out like I was walking a red carpet. The gold silk flowed around me, and I could already see faces in the mansion's windows, people stopping their conversations to stare. Marcus emerged from the other side of the car, devastating in his tailored black tuxedo. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of GQ, but more than that, he looked like he belonged anywhere he chose to be. "Mrs. Holt," he said, offering me his arm with a smile that made my heart skip. "Mr. Holt," I replied, taking his arm and letting him lead me up the steps. The front door opened before we could knock. Cousin Denise stood there in a purple dress that was trying too hard, her mouth literally hanging open. "Alana," she whispered. "Oh my God, Alana, you look different," I suggested, smiling sweetly. "Incredible," she breathed. Then her eyes shifted to Marcus, and I watched recognition dawn on her face. She'd clearly done more research since reaching out to him on LinkedIn. "Everyone," Denise called over her shoulder, her voice carrying through the foyer. "Alana's here." The sound of conversation stopping was almost comical. Footsteps on marble floors. The rustle of formal, whereas people moved toward the entrance to get a look. And then I saw her. Simone appeared at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a red dress that was beautiful, but somehow looked cheap next to my gold silk. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless, but there was something different about her. Something dimmed. Her eyes found me first, and I watched her face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been panic. Then her gaze shifted to Marcus, and the wine glass in her hand simply fell. The sound of crystal shattering on marble echoed through the suddenly silent foyer. Red wine spread across the white stone like blood. "Oops," I said mildly. Marcus squeezed my arm gently, a show of support that didn't go unnoticed by the growing crowd of relatives gathering in the doorway. "Simone," I called up to her, my voice carrying clearly through the space. "You remember Marcus, don't you? Though I suppose you knew him as just an intern back then." Simone's face went white. Actually white, like all the blood had drained from her body. "I don't," she started, but her voice cracked. "Marcus Holt," he said, his voice warm and confident as he addressed the room. "It's a pleasure to meet Alana's family. I've heard so much about all of you." I watched as the whispers started. Someone had their phone out, clearly Googling his name. Another relative was nudging their spouse, pointing at Marcus with barely concealed excitement. "Marcus Holt." Uncle Jerome's voice boomed from the living room. "The Marcus Holt? From Forbes." "Forbes?" Aunt Patricia appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide. "The billionaire Marcus Holt." The word billionaire rippled through the crowd like electricity. I felt Marcus tense slightly beside me. He'd always been uncomfortable with that particular label, preferring to be known for his work rather than his net worth. "I prefer renewable energy innovator," Marcus said diplomatically. "But yes, I've been fortunate in business." Simone was still frozen on the staircase, but now Damien appeared behind her. He looked older, tired, wearing a suit that had seen better days. His eyes met mine briefly, and I saw something flicker there. Regret, maybe, or recognition of how badly he'd miscalculated. "Alana," my mother's voice cut through the whispers as she pushed through the crowd. She was wearing her best dress, the one she saved for church and special occasions, but she looked smaller somehow. Diminished. "You didn't tell me you were bringing someone." "I didn't tell you a lot of things, Mama," I said, allowing a slight edge to enter my voice. "This is my husband, Marcus." The word husband hit the room like a bomb. More whispers, more phone checking, more staring. "Husband." Mama's voice was faint. "We got married 2 weeks ago," Marcus said, his arm tightening around my waist. "I'm the luckiest man alive." I watched my mother's face process this information. Her daughter, the one she'd written off as the disappointment, the one who couldn't keep a man, the one who wasn't ambitious enough, had married a billionaire. But Simone's voice finally worked, and she began descending the stairs on unsteady legs. "But you were just, and in turn making $30,000 a year?" Marcus finished helpfully. "Yes, I remember that conversation. You were very clear about my prospects." The silence was deafening. Even the caterers in the background had stopped moving. "I think," Marcus said, his voice carrying to every corner of the foyer, "this is going to be a very interesting weekend." He was right. But as I watched Simone's world tilt on its axis, as I felt my mother's shocked stare and heard my relatives whispering my name with something that sounded suspiciously like respect, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my story. And judging by the look on everyone's faces, it was going to be one hell of a story to tell. She asked if I married him just to get back at her. I told her no. I married him because he saw the value in me before anyone else did. By Saturday evening, the mansion felt like a pressure cooker ready to explode. All day, I'd watched Simone try desperately to regain control of the narrative she'd crafted so carefully. She'd organized games, speeches, photo opportunities, anything to remind everyone that this was her event, her moment to shine. But it wasn't working. Every conversation somehow circled back to Marcus and his success. Uncle Jerome couldn't stop talking about the renewable energy contracts he'd read about online. Cousin Patricia kept mentioning how Marcus had been featured on the cover of Fortune magazine. Even the younger cousins were Googling his company, showing each other articles about his innovations in solar technology. Marcus handled it all with grace, deflecting attention whenever possible, always redirecting conversations to ask about other people's lives and interests. But his very presence was a constant reminder of what Simone had walked away from, what she'd been too shallow to recognize. Damien, meanwhile, had been avoiding me all weekend. But as we gathered for the traditional Saturday night dinner on the mansion's terrace, I noticed him nursing his third whiskey and looking increasingly uncomfortable. "You know," Simone said loudly during the appetizer course, clearly having had too much wine herself, "it's funny how life works out. Some people chase money. Others chase love." The comment was aimed at me, obviously. Marcus's hand found mine under the table. "I agree," I said calmly. "It is funny how life works out. How the people we think are beneath us sometimes turn out to be exactly what we needed." Simone's smile faltered. "Speaking of life working out," interrupted family friend Mrs. Washington, who'd been suspiciously quiet all evening, "I have to ask, Marcus. Are you the same Marcus Holt who just became the majority shareholder in several Atlanta startups?" Marcus paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. "I do invest in promising ventures, yes." "Including tech companies?" Mrs. Washington pressed. "Among others." I felt rather than saw Damien go rigid beside his place setting. Simone was looking between Marcus and Mrs. Washington with growing alarm. "The reason I ask," Mrs. Washington continued, clearly enjoying herself, "is because my son works in venture capital, and he mentioned that a Marcus Holt recently acquired controlling interests in 3 companies that were, how did he put it, circling the drain." The terrace went silent except for the sound of cicadas and the distant music from the house. "One of them," Mrs. Washington said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air, "was called Dream Tech Solutions." Damien's whiskey glass hit the table so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. That's my company, he said quietly. All eyes turned to Marcus, who calmly finished chewing his bite of salmon before responding. Small world, he said simply. You're my silent partner? Damien's voice was barely a whisper. You're the investor who's been keeping us afloat? Marcus corrected gently. Past tense. The blood drained from Damien's face. What do you mean, was? Marcus set down his fork and looked directly at Damien for the first time all weekend. I pulled out yesterday. My lawyers filed the paperwork Friday afternoon. You can't do that, Simone said, her voice sharp with panic. You can't just, there are contracts obligations. Actually, Marcus said, his voice remaining perfectly calm. I can. The contracts have very specific clauses about investor confidence and company direction. When I lost confidence in the leadership, he shrugged elegantly. Why? Damien asked, and there was something broken in his voice. Why would you do this? Because, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. 3 years ago, your fiancé taught me that actions have consequences. That how we treat people when they can't help us reveals who we really are. Simone shot to her feet, her chair scraping against the stone terrace. This is about me? You're destroying Damien's business because of some petty grudge? I'm not destroying anything, Marcus replied evenly. I'm simply choosing not to support it. There's a difference. You're ruining our lives. Your lives. I found myself standing too, something hot and fierce rising in my chest. Your lives, Simone? Did you think about my life when you took everything I had? Did you consider consequences when you convinced my own family to side against me? That's different. How? The word came out like a whip crack. How is it different? Simone looked around the table, clearly expecting support from our family. But no one met her eyes. Even Mama was staring at her plate. You want to know why I married Marcus? I continued, my voice gaining strength. You asked me earlier if it was to get back at you. The answer is no. I married him because he's the first person who ever saw value in me that had nothing to do with what I could do for him. He saw my work ethic, my integrity, my ability to build something from nothing. I looked around the table at my family, these people who had dismissed me so easily. While you were laughing at his prospects, he was building an empire. While you were focused on what he didn't have, he was creating value that would change entire industries. And while you wrote me off as the sister who couldn't keep a man, I was learning what it meant to be with someone who actually deserved me. Simone's face was streaked with tears now, her makeup running. Alana, please. You don't understand. We're in debt. Serious debt. If Damien's company fails, then maybe you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything, I said quietly. Maybe you'll learn what I learned, that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering who you really are when you have nothing left. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. Finally, Marcus spoke. Actually, he said, his voice softer now, there is one way I might reconsider the investment. Hope flared in Simone's eyes. If Damien can prove the company is worth saving on its own merits. New leadership, new vision, new commitment to ethics and innovation. Marcus paused, without any involvement from current, advisory influences. The meaning was clear. Without Simone, you can't ask me to choose between my business and my fiancé, Damien said. Marcus shrugged. I'm not asking you to choose anything. I'm simply stating my terms for reconsidering the investment. He stood, extending his hand to me. Ready to call it a night, Mrs. Holt? I took his hand, feeling the weight of my wedding ring, the strength of his support. More than ready, I said. As we walked away from the table, I heard Simone's voice break completely. This isn't over, Alana. I turned back one last time, looking at my sister, this woman who had shaped so much of my pain and, inadvertently, so much of my strength. You're right, I said. It's not over. It's just beginning. I didn't come for revenge. I came to show her what self-worth looks like when you don't chase it, but build it. 3 months after the reunion, I stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of our new home in Charlotte, watching Marcus tend to the garden he'd insisted on planting. The house was beautiful, modern but warm, with clean lines and spaces designed for living rather than showing off. Nothing like the mansion in Savannah, and everything like the life we'd built together. Brooks Communications had tripled in size since the reunion. Word travels fast in business circles, and apparently being married to Marcus Holt was better than any advertisement I could have bought. But more than that, the confidence I'd found in standing up to my family had translated into stronger client relationships, bolder creative campaigns, and a reputation for getting results. The mentorship program proposal came back approved. Marcus called from the garden, dirt on his hands and satisfaction in his voice. Full funding for the first year. I smiled, thinking about the program we designed together, scholarships and mentorship for young Black women interested in tech and renewable energy. It would launch with 20 girls, providing them with internships, coding boot camps, and one-on-one mentoring from successful professionals. Any word from the girls we selected? I asked. Keisha starts her internship with my development team next week. And Zara got into that advanced programming course at Duke. Marcus stood, brushing soil from his hands with the same care he brought to everything. They're going to change the world, these kids. It was funny how much purpose we'd found in lifting others up after spending so many years being torn down. My phone buzzed with a text from cousin Denise. Seen Simone's Instagram lately? Girl is struggling. I'd stopped following Simone on social media months ago, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled up her profile, and the change was stark. Gone were the daily posts about luxury brunches and designer purchases. Her last post was from 2 weeks ago, a stock photo of a sunset with a generic quote about new beginnings. The posts before that told a story, a for sale sign in front of what I recognized as her Atlanta apartment, a farewell post about new adventures in Nashville. Photos that looked increasingly desperate, trying to maintain an image that no longer matched her reality. According to Denise's follow-up texts, Damien had taken Marcus's deal. He'd restructured his company, brought in new leadership, and cut all ties with Simone. The business was thriving now, but Damien was apparently working 18-hour days to prove himself worthy of Marcus's continued investment. And Simone? Simone had moved back in with our parents. I should have felt satisfaction. For years, I'd imagined what it would be like to see her fall from grace, to watch her perfect life crumble the way mine had. But standing in my beautiful home, thinking about the mentorship program and the life Marcus and I had built, I felt something unexpected instead. Pity. You're thinking about her again, Marcus said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. How did you know? You get this look when you're processing something difficult, like you're trying to solve a puzzle that doesn't have a clean answer. I leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I keep thinking about what she said, that this isn't over. And is it? Over, I mean? I considered this. The revenge part is. I'm not angry anymore, Marcus. I'm not even hurt, really. I'm just free. But I think about those girls in our mentorship program, about how confidence can be built or destroyed by the people who are supposed to love us. And I think about Simone and how she learned that her worth came from what she could take rather than what she could give. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Do you want to reach out to her? The question surprised me. Do you think I should? I think you should do whatever feels right for the woman you've become, not the woman you were 3 years ago. That evening, I sat down at my laptop and did something I hadn't done since the reunion. I wrote to my sister. Simone, I heard you moved back home. I hope you're finding your footing. I've been thinking about us, about the choices we've made, and why we made them. I'm not writing to gloat or to hurt you. I'm writing because I finally understand something that took me too long to learn. You didn't take Damien from me. You freed me to find something better. You didn't destroy my life. You forced me to build a new one. And in doing that, you gave me the greatest gift you could have given, the chance to discover who I really am when no one else is defining me. I hope you find that for yourself. Not someone else's definition of success, but your own. I forgive you. More importantly, I hope you forgive yourself. Alana. P.S. If you ever want to learn about social media marketing for small businesses, my agency offers consulting services. Family discount included. I hit send before I could second guess myself. 2 hours later, my phone rang. Mama's number. Alana, baby, Simone got your message. And she's crying. Has been for an hour. Says she doesn't deserve your kindness. I thought about that. About deservingness and grace, and the difference between them. Maybe that's the point, Mama. Maybe kindness isn't about what people deserve. Maybe it's about who we choose to be. Later that night, Marcus and I sat on our back porch, watching fireflies dance in the garden. I pulled out my phone and, for the first time since we'd gotten married, posted a photo on Instagram. It was simple. Marcus and me holding hands in front of our house, both of us laughing at something one of us had said. The caption was even simpler. Sometimes the best revenge is happiness. Within an hour, it had dozens of likes. Comments from clients, friends, family members who hadn't spoken to me in years. Even one from Simone, a simple heart emoji. But the comment that mattered most came from one of our mentorship girls, Keisha. Goals. Thank you for showing us what it looks like to choose yourself. I smiled, turning off my phone and reaching for Marcus's hand. No regrets, he asked softly. I thought about everything. The betrayal, the pain, the long journey to this moment. About Simone learning to rebuild from nothing just like I had. About the girls we'd mentor, who would never have to learn self-worth the hard way. None, I said, and meant it completely. After all, some stories end with revenge. The best ones end with peace.